So here's the objective. You know that you want to try and get to land on this square so that you can zip up and get to your goal faster. And you want to avoid these slides, these chutes, so that you don't come sailing back down to the bottom. So that's why we want a budget. We want a budget because we played Chutes and Ladders as kids. Okay, that's step one. That's the why. We want to get to our goal, our North Star. All right, so along the lines of mastering your mindset and you master your money, I want to talk to you about Chutes and Ladders. Why Chutes and Ladders, you say? Bear with me, you're going to love this. So you remember you as a kid, boom, 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 playing a game. We had this game called Chutes and Ladders. And way up here is the goal that we're trying to get to. But you had this board that got you there. And if you remember correctly, occasionally there were ladders. There was one really big ladder that did this, right? Boom, 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 all the way to the top. And if you happened to land on this space, you could take the ladder all the way up to the top. But then there were also these pesky slides. And if you landed on that space, it would shoot you all the way back down to the bottom. Okay? Does this not sound a little bit like business? I would call the ladders opportunities, and I would call the chutes pitfalls or challenges. Let's call them challenges. I hate the word problems. I hope I've spelled that right. So here's the objective. You know that you want to try and get to land on this square so that you can zip up and get to your goal faster. And you want to avoid these slides, these chutes, so that you don't come sailing back down to the bottom. But the problem is, in business, without something called a budget, we don't know where we are. We're rolling the dice just like we did when we were kids and hoping, praying, ducking our head and waiting for the hope that we land on this square and avoid this square. So what does a budget do? A budget says, hey, I know I want to get way up there. I know I'm aiming up there. So I'm going to set up a budget that's going to take this path. And in that path, because I have a budget, I can actually start to see ahead of me because I've laid the groundwork. I've said, if I do thing A, B, and C, I'm going to land on this square. If I do things X, Y, and Z, oh crap, I'm going to land on that square. That's outside of my zone. I don't want to be there. It's outside of my bumper. So our budget lets us stay inside the channel that most directly and quickly gets us to our landing point. So that's why we want a budget. We want a budget because we played Chutes and Ladders as kids. Okay, that's step one. That's the why. We want to get to our goal, our North Star, our end of the board as fast as we possibly can. So that's the why we want a budget. But now comes the big question, Pam. How do I budget? And what's the easiest way to do it? Not easy, because nothing in business is easy, but what's the way to do it where I can leverage my own skills in creating that and doing it and not waste time in a spreadsheet or waste time talking to a bookkeeper or an accountant? Let's talk about that. What is a budget really? Getting that view of where you're going is really just looking at where we are right now. So this is today, and I'll just do a little drawing up here. And then looking ahead to where we want to be tomorrow. And call this our $1 million goal. And I know that I want to progress there in some increments. And I want to be at 250, I want to be at 350, I want to be at 500, 750, 900, and $1 million. Okay, that's what I want my sales to be in my business. Because I know this is pretty much how a lot of entrepreneurs do this. I want to be $1 million business. I want to get there that quickly. So what are each of these little hash marks here? Well, these are months. Let's set them up as months. Let's just turn this little picture that you have in your head and then put away into something you can actually use, okay? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to set up a very basic budget, which has only really two components. The third piece is just math. Component one is income. Component two is expenses. And component three is what's left. Okay, and there are fancy words for these, right? This is actually called revenue. These are called expenses, and this is called net income. And very simply, income minus expenses equals what's left. This is your money coming in. This is your money going out. This is what ends up getting caught in the bucket and you get to keep. Okay? That's simple. That's all the pieces are of a budget. But now what I want you to do to think about this a little bit differently is say, okay, let's not just say I'm going to make $1 million. I'm going to spend $700,000. I'm going to have $300,000 left. 1 million minus 7 equals 300,000. Let's not look at it that way. Instead, let's say, okay, let's lay across the page here the months. What am I going to do in January? What am I going to do in February? What am I going to do in March? All the way out to December. And then you can add it all up for the total year and be at your 1 million. Because now what you've done is taken that very vague dream of I want to make $1 million and you've broken it down into, ooh, how am I going to do that? And let's say what we were going to do is we're going to be, for the next 12 months, we know we're going to start kind of slow in January. We're going to only make $50,000. And in February, we may make 75. And in March, we may make 100. And when we're all done, we're making $200,000 a month by the time we get to December. Okay, cool. But what are the expenses I'm going to have? And let me go back actually to income. What is income? And how do I budget it? Okay? The really cool thing about income is it's only made up of two things. Literally two things. There is quantity and there is price. You sell a thing, whether it's a good or a service, coaching, barbecue sauce, dancing lessons, whatever you want to call it, you sell a thing. And all income is the quantity that you sell times the price you sell it for. So as you're going through your business plan, this sort of forces you to say, I'm going to sell one thing for $50,000, which would be one thing times $50,000, or I'm going to sell 50 things for $1. This is a very important decision to make in your business, and the budget drives you to make it. Because what I'm saying to you is all you have to do, you don't have to guess at how much you're going to make. You just guess at how much you're going to sell. You determine your price, and then you say, how many of those am I going to sell? And let's just take this example and say that my price, I know I'm going to sell my thing. Let's just call it 50, 75, and 100, just so I don't have to keep saying 1,000 at the end of it. I know I want to sell $50 worth of stuff in January. I know my thing costs $5. So right away, by math, I know I have to sell 10. In February, I have to sell, 15? In March, I have to sell 20. So now I've gotten something out of this budget, right? I got to sell 10 things. I got to sell 15 things. I got to sell 20 things. So what we call this price and quantity, which is all that's in here, right? That's all that's in the income line. We call those levers because you as a business owner can control those levers. You can make your price go up and down, and you can decide how much marketing you're going to do, for example, to sell 10 of them. You can decide if you can even deliver 10 of them, because that's another really important question. Once you know these two things, all of a sudden, a lot of questions are answered in your business. How much you can do, whether you need to hire people to help do it, whether you need to spend on marketing, whether you can get the number of leads you need to get that many customers. All of it starts to open up for you, but only when you go through this part of the exercise. Okay, so just in itself, if all you do is budget your income, all of a sudden you're miles ahead. Quite honestly, miles ahead of 90% of the entrepreneurs out there. Showing up for this right here gets you ahead of 90% of the entrepreneurs out there. No kidding. And that's why so many entrepreneurs fail, because they never go through this exercise to realize, oh, I want to make $1 million. Here's how I'm going to do it. I have to sell a thing for a certain price, and I have to sell this many of those things. Okay, that's the income part. Now we've got the incoming money, done that, check. Now what are the expenses? Because we've done this, now we can think about the expenses. So how am I going to generate that much money? What am I going to do? Am I going to spend it on marketing? Am I going to spend it on staff? Am I going to spend it on tech, on software? Am I going to spend it on travel and events where I'm going to speak? What are the things that I'm going to do to get that income? And here's what's really important about the expenses, and a lot of times what we miss. A lot of times we just have expenses. We buy stuff because we need it, but we don't actually go through the exercise of saying, what is this expense doing to drive that number? Because quite frankly, unless an expense here is doing one of two things, it's driving that number, it's helping grow that revenue number by selling more or allowing you to increase the price, then if it's not doing that or keeping you out of jail because you're following some sort of regulatory stuff, then it should not be an expense on this spreadsheet. Okay? Now, here's why I will say that your bookkeeping should be one of these expenses, because your bookkeeping is the very thing that's going to allow you to know what are the decisions you need to make in order to drive that revenue number. And without it, you're flying blind. Just like without a budget, you're flying blind. You're just flapping your arms in the wind and going wherever it carries you, which is fine for a hobby, but not for a business, okay? So now, what do I mean when I say, is it driving revenue? Well, let's take marketing, for example. Let's say I know that in order to get 10 clients, I need to have 20 phone calls. And in order to get 20 phone calls, I need to get, I'm making this up, 200 leads. How much is it going to cost me to get 200 leads? Okay, and we know we have to do it because that's the only way we're going to get these 10 customers. So that's how you'd think about marketing expense, and you'd budget it. And let's just say for fun, in this example, we know that's going to cost us $15 a month in this particular case to get $50,000 of revenue. How much staff do I need? Let's say I know, shoot, I can only deliver 8 of those myself. Once this is over 8, I got to hire somebody to at least do whatever the thing is that we do to deliver that service or that product. So let's say I know I'm going to have to need to have staff of 5. And let's say my tech is 1, and my travel is 1, and my bookkeeping is 1. My total expenses then add up to 23. And then I take my 50 minus my 23, and I have 27 left that goes into the bucket. Okay, and that's my budget. I have budgeted my income. We talked about how, price times quantity. I've budgeted my expenses because for each one of these line items, I have determined that they either what? Drive revenue. They drive that number there. They keep me out of jail. Okay, or they reduce another expense. All right, so let's say there's 3 things. Reduced expense. Say that I can spend $10 on tech and as a result save myself a $20 trip somewhere and still get the same result. Well, that's trading $10 for $20, so boy, I'll take that in a minute. So those are the 3 reasons. Every single expense you have on your P&L or on your budget, you should be able to pressure test with that in mind, answering one of those 3 things: drive revenue, keep you out of jail, or reduce expenses. Mastering our mindset helps us master our money, because you have earned that not just by the work you've done in your company, but by the risk you've taken to be able to do that work. So, circling back, why do I want to do this? I need a GPS system to get me to where I'm going. Remember the chutes and ladders story, right? You want to be able to avoid those obstacles and hit those ladders. And the key to that is knowing where you're going and what your boundaries are, and keeping as many of those obstacles outside the boundaries as you can. You can bounce around inside those boundaries, but you know outside of them there are a lot of obstacles. Second is, how do we do it? Well, we take care of our income. What is that? Very simply, what are we pricing what we sell, and how many are we going to sell? And this is a very important thing for you to know anyway. And once you've tied it into your budget, you can now budget for these expenses very clearly, because every expense here should relate to generating some of that revenue, keeping you out of jail, or reducing another one of these expenses. And when you budget your income and you budget your expenses, then by natural math, you get left with your net income, which you can then use for all sorts of things. 1, grow your business. 2, share your profit. 3, use it as the owner. Take it out and invest it in something else or go take a vacation. I hope that video was helpful, and I hope you subscribe to my channel for more information on finances in your business.